Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us on today's webinar, EnterpriseOne Upgrade Spring Cleaning Tips and Tricks. We will start off with a quick agenda. First of all, I'll jump ahead and let you know my name is Doug McCarthy. I am VP of Sales and Operations at Team Kane, and will be your moderator today. And what we're going to cover, more introductions. We'll go through some quick housekeeping. We'll talk about why people archive, why you might need to archive, data quality problems, data quality effects, data quality resolutions. We'll go through some case studies. Then we'll actually get to an actual demo. We'll jump right into the software, show you how it works, the ins and outs. Leave some time at the end for some questions and answers, and then we'll go through some surveys and possible next steps. So, as I said, Doug McCarthy, I'm the VP of Sales and Operations. I do part owner of Team Kane. I've been with JD Edwards 17, 18 years now. Started off on the CNC side of things way back when. 4 years with Team Kane on the vendor side. Prior to that, all of my experience was as a customer of JDE, and my 6 years of JDE archiving experience started from a customer perspective, where I was out looking at all the possible tools and settled on Purge It for a lot of the reasons that we're going to talk about today. Team Kane, we've been a JDE partner since 1995. We do only work with JDE from an ERP perspective. We've got hundreds of customers across North America and beyond, both Canada, US majority, and then beyond with around the world. As I said, we only deal with JDE, the services and products around that. We've been the Partner of the Year with Click for 4 years running, hoping to keep that going. And with that, we have over 100 Purge and Archive projects, and actually not just with Click. Prior to Purge It being on the market, we did work with another partner, so we have a lot of ability to compare and contrast the two tools, and let you know that why we think that Purge It is the best tool out there. The most important thing on how we look at things from a project perspective, especially on Purge, but definitely true across all of the projects in the JDE space that we work on, we like to take a customer approach. We don't like to just come in and say, hey, this is the way you should do it, or this is the way you're going to do it. We will tell you best practices and discuss that and come up to a conclusion together on what we think will be the best way to make that work. And with me, the star of the show, Russell Stainer. Russ, thanks for joining. I'll turn it over to you.
Cheers, Doug. Star of the show. A lot to live up to now. Thanks very much.
I'd like to put the pressure on you.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, you always do. So just to follow on from something that Doug was saying before, we've got a webinar survey, a post-webinar survey after the event as well. So if you want to fill in some feedback on that after the webinar, we greatly appreciate it. And there's I think there's a Starbucks gift card coming out of that as well.
Yeah, you can actually choose Starbucks or Amazon. We'll pick a random winner out of the people that complete that quick survey at the end of the webinar.
Excellent. Yeah, and some feedback on the content of the survey of the webinar as well, because this is a new webinar today. So let us know what you think of it. So a quick introduction of me. As you can see, this is me. Hello. I'm head of sales at Click IT, but for the last 19 years I've been working hands-on with the JD Edwards software as a JD Edwards consultant. The last 10 years of which have been with Click IT, and I've been working with Purge It for all of that time in various roles through specifying, developing, testing, implementing, and selling the Purge It product around the world as well. I've moved into the head of sales role in October, but prior to that I was a Purge It implementation consultant and pre-sales consultant as well. So I should be able to answer any technical, functional or commercial questions that you've got, as will Doug. So Click IT, we're 100% JD Edwards. All of the staff within Click are JD Edwards consultants, and all of the staff have 19 years or more of experience with JD Edwards hands-on. And yes, that's right, with that's me, that 19 years. I'm the youngster. Um, so Click IT was formed in 98, so about 20 years ago now, and we've been an Oracle partner since 2004. And the main reason for that is so that we could get the latest releases of the JD Edwards software as soon as they became available, and therefore keep our products in line with our customers' installations of JD Edwards around the world. And now we're getting on, as you can see there, for nearly 200 project customers around the world. So just a quick housekeeping note. If you have any trouble with your audio, then please use the audio settings in your GoToWebinar control panel there. If you want to ask a question, then you can enter that in the question box, and we'll pick these questions up as we go through the webinar and also at the end of the webinar. And if you want to draw immediate attention to a question that you've asked, feel free to use the raise your hand button as indicated in the last picture there, if you've got that available to you. So you've come to this webinar today with your own requirements and needs for purging and archiving, but why do other people archive? What other reasons are there that people archive for? You might find that you archive for one particular reason, but you then achieve benefits in multiple other areas because of this. And we'll take a look at some of the reasons that people archive, the benefits they achieve from that, and how Purgit can help them to do this. So just a quick overview of the purging and archiving process before we get into the reasons why people purge and archive. People need to keep data for two reasons really. One is for operational purposes and the second is for legal purposes. The operational data you keep within the production system because you're using it on a day-to-day basis. The legal data you keep in the archive because you don't need it day to day, but it is required to be kept from a legal perspective. So you can then put this legally required data into an archive, which is separate to the main production database. You then get the benefits around a much smaller and quicker production database. The third subset of data in this picture is that data on the left-hand side there, i.e. the data that you no longer need operationally or legally and therefore can delete from the system. And we'll get onto that later on as well. So one of the main reasons that people purge and archive is to reduce the size of the database. You have smaller tape requirements for the backups, and then the backups are smaller and quicker, which leaves you with a larger overnight job window for all the scheduled jobs. Once the reduction in size has been replicated across to the test environments, then you have an overall smaller disk requirement for the whole system. This allows for quicker data refreshes, and if the data refreshes are carried out of hours, then because they're quicker, then less overtime might be required to perform this activity. Smaller data means smaller space requirements and smaller processing requirements. Therefore, you don't necessarily have to buy as big a hardware setup when you upgrade as you previously would have done. Also, the purging from your archive will allow you to dispose of the data that's no longer needed, that last left-hand side section that we've spoke about on the previous slide. Now here's an example from one of our customers. From the year 2000 to 2016, they generated nearly 1.1 million sales orders. The blue line at the bottom is how many sales orders were generated per year, and the red line at the top is the total amount of sales orders that they had in their system in the year 2016 at this point. And they hadn't done any archiving throughout those 16 years. If they'd kept a 1 year plus current or a 2 years plus current data retention policy in place, then the two lines in between here will show you the maximum number of orders that would have been in the system at any one time. Now this is just an example over their sales order database, but the same is true across all of the other modules within JD Edwards in their system and probably within yours too. So improving performance is another major driver for purging and archiving. Batch jobs and interactive jobs process record by record, so having fewer records in the system results in quicker batch jobs and quicker interactive jobs. If you're only processing the active data, then that results in quicker reporting. Smaller tables result in quicker full table scans if you've got non-index queries that are used. And talking about indexes, index rebuilds are much quicker over smaller tables. Index rebuilds result in less fragmented indexes, which then result in a quicker database performance overall. So you get lots of knock-on effects from being able to do additional things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. And then the last point there, in terms of interfaces, if you remove any processed data, then those interfaces will operate much more quickly as well. Legal compliance is increasing in popularity for the reasons for archiving. As people accumulate more and more data within their JD Edwards system, And having an effective data retention policy helps you to define what data you legally need to keep and what data you legally can purge from your system. And when I say purge, I mean delete. So the data retention policy also defines the methods and frequencies for data archiving and data disposal. It gives you a structured management framework for the use of archiving and for the use of the archiving and the disposal of data. And some people refer to it as an information lifecycle management policy, but data retention policy, ILM policy, it's the same, they're effectively the same thing. For all of our Purge customers, we have a template data retention policy that you can use and amend to suit your organization if you don't have one in place already. Data cleansing and business process improvement tends to be a secondary benefit of purging and archiving. Most people don't go into a purging and archiving project with this as their primary objective, but a lot of people come out of the project with this as a separate deliverable. With the comprehensive auditing functionality available within Purge It, we can identify open, incomplete or unprocessed transactions. We can observe and enforce the relationships between documents to maintain data integrity within the system. We can identify lifecycle errors for transactions and business processes, and we can identify business process errors such as purchase orders not being receipted, and we can identify the transactions that are still open and therefore that we're not able to archive. Now, purging and archiving with Purge It also provides the ability for active data management through the use of the new Purge It dashboards, which you'll see in the demonstration. You can view percentage splits between production and archive databases. You can view that down at system and module level. You can see when each module was last archived, and you can see a breakdown by module within a particular environment, all on one screen. So we'll take a look at that when we get into the demo. Also high on the list for reasons for purging and archiving is faster and more confident upgrades. So that's in the title of today's presentation. By reducing the amount of data within the system, you can then ensure that the main upgrade can be completed within the allotted time window. The smaller production database also has knock-on effects for other processes as part of the upgrade. So quicker creation of test environments, quicker backups, quicker restores, and quicker refreshes, which all result in a much faster process, and therefore a higher quantity of test upgrades can be performed prior to the main upgrade. This leaves you with an increased confidence in the upgrade process because you've done more tests. The archive data can be upgraded on a separate schedule, which means you can upgrade it prior to the main production upgrade as well. And then the archive data is instantly available when you go live in the new release of JD Edwards. Archiving prior to the upgrade also gives you data cleansing opportunities where you can clean up the data before it is either archived or upgraded, mitigating the possibility of upgrading any poor quality data. Now, a knock-on effect of archiving is optimized disaster recovery procedures as well. And again, it's down to smaller databases. So the size requirement of the backup media is reduced. You have quicker recovery times if you're ever in a disaster situation, and you need lower spec hardware for your disaster recovery solution as well. From a time and motion perspective, if people have to wait for the system to respond before they carry out another activity, then a faster performing system would reduce the wait time or eliminate it completely. And smaller, faster systems, but using the same hardware, generally result in fewer performance-related help desk calls being logged, freeing up the IT staff for more proactive activities. Keeping on top of the purging and archiving process can then result in ongoing benefits. So maintaining all of the above benefits but going forward by purging and archiving either on a scheduled or regular basis and not requiring any system downtime with the Purge It product. Using the Purge It date offset functionality in conjunction with the JD Edwards scheduler results in a fire and forget archiving solution. If I go silent now and again, it's just so that I can clear my throat and have a quick drink. So those are some of the reasons why people purge and archive, but during the process of purging and archiving, you might identify problems in your data quality. So what kind of problems can we get? What effects do they have? and what possible resolutions do we have? One of the major problems is garbage in, garbage out. You can only get out good information if good quality data is entered. And in an average system, between 1 and 5% of data entered is incorrect. You can also have problems with the business process or the complete life cycle of a transaction. Invariably, you get an amount of transactions that are not complete across the system. And in order to ensure quality in the system, you have to try and consider 5 aspects. The accuracy of the data in one transaction, consistency of that accuracy across multiple transactions, currency, i.e. how up to date the data is the data complete, and are you entering duplicated data, for example, a duplicate address book record. If you have poor quality data within the system, then the information that's generated from that data may be unreliable, unavailable, or inaccurate. And this can be for any of the information generated from or the processes performed on the data after it's been entered. Now, this could be for further processing, it could be for business intelligence and decision making, or it could be for high-level strategic activities within the whole company. It can affect things operationally, tactically, and strategically, and if we don't have any method of measuring the quality of the data, then it's effectively unmanaged data. Specific effects of this could be in reduced customer satisfaction. If, for example, it takes a long time to enter a sales order, or retrieving sales order information fails, or takes too long, or comes back with the incorrect data. Post-processing of incorrect data can increase the administration costs in both detecting any errors and in correcting them. And if this is a manual task, then with the minimum wage in the USA at the moment, that would cost you at least 12 cents per minute to identify and correct the data. If one person enters poor quality data and another person has to use that data in part of their process, then the second person may have lower morale, may resent the first person who entered the incorrect data, and then there may be some distrust between the departments. And we don't want that kind of thing in the business, do we? We know the concept of data ownership, but whether it actually exists and it's put into practice throughout the organization is another matter. So what kind of problems can we have, and how do we deal with them? Well, within the Purge It product, we perform lots of validations within each of the purge and archive routines. Some of them are soft-coded to allow you to turn them on and off, and some of them are hard-coded to protect the data integrity of the document that we're processing. We won't go into any of the detail of this slide here, but you'll see the effect of this in the kind of errors that we can identify over the next few slides. So I've written down the different types of errors, but I've categorized them into 4 different types of corrections that we can apply to those errors. The first type of correction is where we can correct a process or some configuration within the Purge and Archive routine. If we process a document and it's still related to another document within the system, for example a sales order to a purchase order relationship in a direct ship order, then we can change this type of validation on a processing option in the Purge and Archive routine. It may actually be a valid error and we may want to keep the processing option exactly as it is, in which case it is reporting out a valid data integrity issue within the system and we have to go off and close the related sales or purchase order. We also identify where transactions cross boundaries. So for example, a purchase order was created before our archiving cutoff date, but a receipt on the purchase order was made after the cutoff date. In this instance, we wouldn't archive the purchase order because it's not completely less than the cutoff date. And when the cutoff date gets moved forward in the future, then this purchase order would then fully become eligible for archiving. So there's nothing to do to correct this type of error. It's just identifying that a document, as it's gone through its normal life cycle, is straddling our archiving cutoff date. On the bottom there, the inventory transactions can be posted to the item as of ledger, and if this has not been done before the archiving process using the standard processes, then an error would be reported and the transaction wouldn't be archived. A correction to this type of error is to run the normal item as of post program and then rerun the purging and archiving routine. The second type of correction that we can apply are quick fixes to correct the data. If the document's not posted to the general ledger, then there's the opportunity to run the standard post program. You have to be aware, however, of posting into prior fiscal years and fiscal periods in this instance. Sometimes the related order information held in sales orders or purchase orders is incomplete. You may have an entry in the related order number field, but nothing in the order type and order company fields. Therefore, you only have part of the primary key to go off and find a related order, and therefore it's unreliable and incomplete data. The two fixes that you need to apply to this are, one, correct the data that you're relying on within these fields, and then two, also correct the root cause of why this data was incorrectly populated in the first place so that it doesn't happen again. The last example on the slide is where an account master record is missing. This might be a valid situation where a single account has been deleted, but more likely it's probably part of a chart of accounts conversion process which has incorrectly mapped transactions to a non-existent account. So the simple resolution for this would be to either create the missing account or to correct the account details on the transaction, and you have to just do a bit of analysis to figure out which one's the correct fix for that. The third type of data fix is where you have to consider it a little bit further. And I mentioned before about transactions not being posted to the GL, and we have to consider whether we post this using the normal post program or whether we just update the posted flag using SQL. When posting to fixed assets, you also have to consider whether you're going to post or pass transactions to the fixed assets ledger. Again, with fixed assets, you may be upsetting the prior fiscal period and years if you post into that ledger. Some transactions have open amounts and not at the final status. You should close these via the standard JD Edwards programs, which would ensure that all of the related data and tables are updated correctly. But that may be a time-consuming aspect from the manual perspective. Or do you perform an SQL update to correct the data, which is quick but normally dirty, and it may leave orphan transactions or leave other modules and tables that are not updated correctly. If you think about everything that happens within the sales order master business function, then just updating the status within the F4211 line might not be appropriate. Some transactions may not have had a particular process carried out on them. For example, a purchase order has not been receipted or a receipt has not been matched. Again, the correct way of closing this data off is via the standard JD Edwards programs, which again could be time consuming, so you have to consider whether an SQL update might be appropriate for particular corrections. Corrections on data integrity reports are a separate activity and don't directly affect whether a transaction would be purged and archived by Purge It. Standard JD Edwards data integrity reports are validating for different things than Purge It's validating for, so you don't necessarily have to clean the integrity reports before you purge and archive. And some of the errors that you encounter may just be down to the inherent structure of the data. For example, documents that you're processing have relationships to other documents that are still in the system, and they must be maintained. An accounts receivable invoice exists, and therefore we can't archive the GL distribution related to that invoice. Also, updating a document may change its eligibility for archiving. For example, if you change a work order status via the programs, then that means that the work order change date is then updated to today. Today is greater than the cutoff date used in the purge and archive routines, and therefore this work order would then not be purged and archived because it looks like there's been activity on that order today. If a purchase order is partially receipted and then the remainder of the receipt is carried out today, again, today is greater than the cutoff date used in the purge and archive routines, and therefore the purchase order wouldn't be purged and archived. And also, if you void a transaction in AP or AR, although the original transaction and the new transactions are in different batches, those batches are related to each other, and today's batch might stop the older batch from being purged and archived. So there are some sort of knock-on effects. As you sort of correct the data, it might then not be purgeable or archivable for a while, or some of it just isn't eligible until the date moves forward. So in summary, there are several types of resolution methods to poor quality data that you have at your disposal. Which one you use has to be decided upon on a case-by-case basis based on the type of the correction. And generally, it's in the realms of the BA to decide that. Sometimes it may be standard JD Edwards processes that need to be employed. Sometimes it's SQL. Sometimes you may decide to get a developer to create a custom batch job to address a particular need. And medium term, you should be looking at process improvement to stop or reduce the poor quality data being entered into the system in the first place. and also processes for monitoring and managing the data quality going forward. As we've seen in some of the areas, you can turn on and off particular validations in the processing options as well. So in summary, for data quality, it's very easy to say, but you should try and try your best to keep it clean in the first place. You may want to employ some processes to monitor the quality of the data, like the standard JD Edwards data integrity reports, or maybe some other reports like open purchase orders, unmatched purchased order receipts, and so on. And it's important to have data owners and the ownership of the data within the system. Ownership should be at job role level, not an individual named person level, so that the responsibility remains after people change jobs. When you're purging and archiving your data, it's always best to work with the business to determine what needs to be archived and also how to correct any data problems that exist, rather than just doing it purely from an IT perspective. You can structure the data fixing process and make sure it's appropriate for the particular piece of data that needs to be corrected. And if you don't have one already, then you should try and employ a data retention policy as well. So one of the big bits of today is case studies. So let's move on to some case studies about people who have used the Purgit product, what their background is, what process they followed, and what benefits they've achieved from purging and archiving. So there's a few slides for each of the cases. I think there's 5 in different cases here. And then after the case studies, we'll get into a quick demo of the Purgit product as well. So the Hardinge group are based in the USA, but they've got worldwide operations as well. And they have multiple servers in multiple locations with databases varying in size. In the USA instance, their 1 terabyte of storage was running at about 70% capacity, so therefore they decided it was time to purge and archive. They also had an upgrade plan for JD Edwards as well, and their dilemma was, do they purge and archive before or after the upgrade? As a slight aside on that, from a recent customer survey, we found that 95% of our customers told us that they would purge and archive as part of an upgrade, and 85% of those said that they would do it before the upgrade occurred to achieve the benefits that we spoke about earlier in the presentation. Hardinge also chose to purge and archive before their upgrade. They decided to use the USA as a starter case before rolling it out to the rest of the world, and they saw purging and archiving with Purgit as a great opportunity to review and correct any performance issues that they had, apply improvements to those, and also to clean up any data integrity issues that they had prior to the future upgrades. They installed the ASU themselves. They ran from the outside in, so they started with orders, moved on to batches, and finally finished with the general ledger. And they also included custom tables within the processes as well. They executed the project themselves, what we call a DIY approach, and they had some hours of training before that, obviously, on the Purgit product themselves prior to starting the project. They now use Purgit at the end of Q1 every year, where they move 1 year to the archive and then delete the oldest year from the archive. So they archive 1 year and then they purge a year from the archive. Continuing their process, they made sure that they ran the standard JD Edwards data integrity reports before the purge and archive routines and afterwards as well. They didn't see any issues on those reports before and after, as a result of the purging and archiving, and everything was still in balance. They involved the key functional users during the decision-making processes and also during the validations of the data integrity reports and during the key performance indicators as well. So where people were running things like trial balances and open AR invoices, they got the business involved in those. Everyone was on the same page, which made for a very successful project. They reviewed the audit reports together, they reviewed the data integrity reports together, and they discussed the general process for purging and archiving within workshop meetings together. So Hardinge benefited from virtually zero consulting drag, as they called it, because they performed a DIY purging and archiving project. They had some assistance during the upgrade process of Purgit, but it was minimal. Their performance improved. They resolved previously unknown issues that they had in the system from the data integrity validations, and they've now been running Purgit for over 7 years in their business. It's running as a regular process in-house, and Purgit's running in a business as usual mode. So I'll let you read this quote from them. So moving on to the next one, the second case study that we've got today is from Premium Waters. And they were upgrading from 8.12 to 9.1 at the time, and they had a bunch of different JD Edwards modules. They had a bit of a false start, whereby they went in with a notable generic archiving tool to start with, and they ran into several problems with it. The feedback that they gave us was that they couldn't stop the processes once they'd started, because effectively the processes were um, one big SQL statement with a very wide open where clause. So it was very difficult to stop it partway through. There was some other problems they had. There was conflicting information between the documentation they had that they were reading and the feedback that they were getting from the support line, which sort of reduced their confidence in that respect. They had quite a bit of difficulty in setting up the processes in the first place because it was quite technical. It wasn't simple or intuitive like they thought it would be, and they made the tough decision to switch products partway through the process, and they chose Purge.it as their replacement for the generic archiving tool. Because of their false start, they were unable to purge and archive before their upgrade project, and as a result of this, they realized the extent of their bad data within the system, which they encountered during the upgrade processes. With all of the legacy data still within the system, they experienced delays and performance issues in querying and reporting after the upgrade, and they really wanted to have dealt with this via the purging and archiving before the upgrade occurred. They decided to keep 2 years plus current in the production environment, and then a rolling archive of 5 years prior to that in the archive. So a total of 7 years plus current is kept within JD Edwards, split across live and archive. Everything else is deleted or purged from the archive. They went with the Purge.it same environment approach, where you can access the archive data from within the same production environment. They didn't have to create, secure, or maintain a separate archive environment, and the end users don't have to sign out of JD Edwards in order to get access to the archive data. Premium Waters deleted about 200 gigabytes of data, which was about a third of their total, and the remainder was split between the production and archive databases. Finance immediately noticed that their reporting was significantly quicker. There were a lot less database locks when multiple people were running similar reports, especially at month end as well. And the nightly backups were a lot faster due to the reduced amount of data in the production database. This then freed up the overnight job schedule for the jobs that they needed to run. And as with all Purge.it customers, they ran the purge and archive routines during the day whilst people were logged onto the system. And there were no issues for either any existing JD Edwards processes, the purge and archive processes, or for any interactive inquiries by the users. They now purge and archive annually after year end, just like Hardinge. Here's a quote from Premium Waters, which again I'll let you read. Now we've got Damon Worldwide, which I could let Doug talk about because Doug actually selected Purge.it and used it at Damon Worldwide a couple of years before he started with Team Kane. But in the interest of consistency, I'll just carry on with the presentation.
I'll make sure to correct you if anything goes astray.
Oh, please do, please do. So Damon had been through a series of upgrades, keeping relatively up to date on the JD Edwards releases as they became available. And after being on the bleeding edge of EnterpriseOne, or One World as it was called then, back in 1999, they were now up to EnterpriseOne version 9.1. They'd never purged an archive before, and the amount of data in the system was rapidly expanding. If you think back to that sales order graph that I showed you earlier, data grows or tends to grow exponentially within your JD Edwards system as you start using more modules, more functionality, and adding in more data. The performance of such a large database was severely impacted, and reports were taking a long time to run. The backup process was slowing down significantly, and they were looking for a solution which would work on their existing JD Edwards implementation as well. They found that Purge.it was easy to install and to run over the standard JD Edwards tables and also over their custom tables as well, where they found it very easy to use. They needed very little technical support. I was doing a lot of the technical support at that time, and I can't remember talking to Doug very much at all at that point. They purged any redundant data directly from production, and they also purged from their archive as well. So deleting any of that data that they didn't need legally. So some of the benefits that they got, some numbers, they cut their backup times in half. They took 2/3 of the data out of their production system across all of the modules, and then taking into account how much they purged from the archive, overall they saved about 1/3 of the overall space in that deleted data. They had a lot fewer help desk calls after that on slow running reports. The IT department were then freed up to do more proactive activities, and they archived about 10 years worth of data overall. And here's a quick quote. So switching to a local government case study, the District of Saanich were actually one of the first Purgit customers in the North American region. They're a very large municipality based in Vancouver and in British Columbia, and they had an out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality with their JD Edwards data, and therefore purging and archiving was either a very low or a non-existent priority. But they realised that they needed to be proactive in purging and archiving rather than waiting for when it came and bit them. They also knew that an upgrade would be in their future, so cleaning up the data before they upgraded was a good and recommended approach, especially by Oracle themselves. They were juggling their nightly backups as well and having to accommodate the increasing runtime of overnight batches. Batches take longer because there's more data, and the reports take longer to run because there's more data, so it's a no-win situation all round if you don't archive in that situation. Just as an aside, I'm going off script now. This was there was another company who were doing what was it? It was an MRP build overnight, and their full MRP build overnight was causing them problems. So they switched to a partial MRP build, and then and then that carried on for a couple of years, and then that started causing the problems as well. And then they didn't have anywhere to go because they'd already gone from full to partial. They couldn't then knock it down any further, so they were like, we need to archive. So they came to us, and we helped them out. The District of Saanich is a public organisation, and therefore due diligence was performed, reviewing several purging and archiving products before settling on the Purgit product as their chosen solution. They kept a very conservative 7 years of data in the production tables, but even doing that, they uncovered some data issues that would have otherwise gone totally unknown, just like one of the earlier case studies as well. The municipalities' end users rapidly accepted the Purgit product into the system, and they also used the methods of accessing the archive data from within the same environment. And the large part of the acceptance was due to the seamless integration of Purgit being built within the JD Edwards toolset. So accessing the archive data is really easy for those end users. So here's a quick quote before we move on to our last case study. And Dorrell Juvenile Group manufacture child safety equipment, so like car seats. Um, they were going through an upgrade process, and they had actually started creating their own purging and archiving programs back in 2008. But in their eyes, they weren't comprehensive enough to do the job safely, and they didn't have the manpower to properly get the job done as they wanted it to be done. The end users were also concerned about the integrity of the data after the homegrown purging processes were employed. So the end users insisted that the data integrity be maintained as part of any archiving process, and also that they needed simple and easy access to the archived data. Consequently, they decided to look for an off-the-shelf purging and archiving solution that ticked all of the boxes. As I mentioned, they were also planning for an upgrade, and that data conversion would have taken over 60 hours, but they only had a 36-hour window scheduled. And the upgrade project began just after the investigation into archiving, and this had several effects on the archive project. It complicated the archiving project plan. The need for archiving was much more urgent because of that 60-hour problem, and the staff availability was now severely restricted because they were being used on multiple projects. So after installing the Purgit product, they archived their data from the main culprits within the system, i.e. the key transactional tables, and they took out 5 years of data, processing it 1 year at a time, just to do things incrementally. They also use the Purge It custom module to purge and archive a lot of the custom tables. Now, because of the impending upgrade, they were being pressured to complete the purging and archiving project as quick as possible, and the process only took them about 3 to 4 weeks end to end, and that was from installing the product through fully testing it in the prototype environment and then completing the purging and archiving in production as well. The staff involved were also working on other projects as well as the archiving project, including the upgrade project. So multitasking, as everybody has to do nowadays. They took 2/3 of the data out of their main tables that they archived, and the business staff were able to see the archive data immediately and from within JD Edwards because they also used the same environment approach. And going forward, after the upgrade was performed, they continued to keep their house clean with the annual archives. So here's a quick quote from them. Now, if we've got time, we will. Yeah, I'm going to do a really quick demo. Okay, it's only going to be about five to 10 minutes, and I'll just give you the very sort of high level version of Purge It. If you would like to see Purge It in a lot more detail, then have a word with Doug. Doug can arrange a customer specific demo for you where you and your team can join in. We can set up a 90-minute demo and Q&A session where you can see as much as the Purge It product as you want to. You can ask whatever questions you want to, and then we can see how Purge It fits within your organization. So, as I say, we're just going to sign into JD Edwards here. We're in Apps 9.2 and Tools 9.2, and as I say, I won't talk about everything, but we'll go through an end-to-end process. So first thing we'll do is we'll go and configure a purge and archive routine via the delivered task view and tasks and task relationships here. We go into the purge and archive routine here. I'm going to choose sales for this example. It's a batch version. It opens up in normal batch versions, and therefore you configure it with normal processing options and data selection. In the processing options, just go back one. You can have as many batch versions as you want to in here with different data selections and different processing options if you need to employ different data retention policies on different subsets of the data, just like normal batch versions. So very simple processing options to configure the routines. They're all either yes, no answers, blank one, or blank 1, 2 type answers. So in this case, we've got run the routine in proof or update mode. Proof mode does all the same validation, and it gives you all of the audit data. It just doesn't move the records across to the archive. And then when you're ready, you can run the routine in update mode, and then that moves it across to the archive as well. So on the general tab, there's some other settings that are specific to that particular module. On the selections tab, you can either put in a hard-coded date, such as end of December 2015. That would then make sure you keep 2016, 2017, and whatever's in 2018. Ignore the 29 that I've got in there. That's just because we've got demo data. The other thing that you could do is use these date offsets, and date offsets are configured, and you can configure your own ones as well, where you can dynamically calculate the cutoff date. So this one here is a rule that's defined behind that 3F years, which will always calculate 2 years plus current. So if I came into here on the 1st of January 2019, this would then automatically resolve to 12/31/2016, enabling another year's worth of data to be archived. The benefit of this is that you can select that 3F years, put it in the processing option, and then this whole batch version can be put on the standard JD Edwards scheduler, and it can be running in the background on a regular basis, automatically updating its cutoff date whenever it needs to. So it's a fire and forget solution. On the modular validations, this is where we can check two related documents in the same module, but also related documents in different modules as well. And as I said before, it's simple blank 1, 2 type configuration. We've done all of the configuration that you need to in the background, so what tables are required to be purged and archived, what columns we need to validate, how we link the tables together, everything like that is all done within the CMaster business function that actually does the main purge and archive routine, and then just the things that you need to make decisions on are then exposed to you via these processing options, so that you've got very simple configuration in here. All of the processing options also have full help text behind them as well, so if you forget about anything, then you can just press F1 and find out that. So let's just check here, that's set to a U, so I can run it. So we do a select, submit. We can choose data selection if we want to, add our own data selection in, but we just run it like any other purge and archive routine. Now if I quickly see if I can pop into here, catch this while it's still running. Yep, okay, I've got it. So the purge and archive routine, because it's a batch version, it runs in work with submitted jobs, but you only get P in work with submitted jobs to say P for processing. We've got our own auditing functionality where you can actually see things happen as the purge and archive routine occurs. So here I submitted session number 880 there. It's sales. I ran it in update mode. It was still running when I when I came into this application. And that was the date and time that I submitted it on. The purge amount in megabytes at the end there is dynamic. So this number will update automatically as the purge and archive routine runs, and it will show you how much data you have already archived. You'll also see in the rest of this form in a minute that you can see record counts by individual tables as well. Now, as well as row exits and form exits, we've also got single press buttons where you can do things like cancel the job, reprint the PDF if you've lost the original, you can reverse the whole session either in proof or update mode, and you can get access to detailed transactional audit information down to the individual order level. So order number 1234, company 1, so, document type SO, you can see that information in there and whether it was successful or unsuccessful. If it's unsuccessful, you can also see the reasons why it's unsuccessful as well. Now, these dashboards aren't just a grid, they're actually a power form. So this is built within the standard JD Edwards toolset. So you don't need any additional OneView reporting licenses or anything like that. And you get dynamic information about the purge and archive routine. It tells you what was successful, what was unsuccessful, what's in process. Here are the number of records per table that have been archived, and also the number of errors as well. So if I click find there, then for the errored information, it gives me all of the errored information here. And if I want to select one of those, I can take an exit, and then I can see all of the orders that had that particular error. We can export the data, go off and correct it, and then purge and archive it again at a later date. Now we can also look at this information from the big picture, and we can look at the whole environment where we gather statistics from the database, and we see what's in production, what's in the archive, how production is broken down by module, how the archive is broken down by module, and then depending on which segment or row you've selected here, the grid and the stacked bar chart will change down here according to the different modules. So there's AR, I haven't archived AR, GL, I've archived about 40% of that, inventory, let's click somewhere else, there's inventory, I've archived 45% of it. The last archive date in here also links you directly back to the purge and archive routine for that particular module, so you can then immediately go off and purge and archive or run another purge and archive. The archived data is available. Let's go into sales, go into customer service archive inquiry, and the archive data can be accessed either from within the standard JD Edwards environment, if you want it configured that way, via these read-only archive applications that come with Purge-it. So everything's read-only at the code level. You don't need to apply any action security on there. Or you can set Purge-it up so you sign out and you sign into a separate archive environment if that's your preference. So you can do either or, and if you choose one method and decide to go with another one afterwards, you can switch between the two of them as well. Now I'll keep that application open because in terms of the demo, let's just go back to the session there. We saw how we ran a Persian archive routine. Sorry, we configured it, we ran it, We looked at the audit data here. We looked at how we access the archive data. Now let's say we need to reverse this session as well. So let's press the button here, purge reversal in final mode. Maybe I was just testing something or I made a mistake. I can just instantly go, yep, I want to reverse that whole session. If I click find whilst it's reversing, you'll see that some of the blue segment here, which is purged and archived, gets changed to reversed as the routine is running. So on a record by record basis, the audit data is getting updated. And then when we press find again, we'll see that everything's gone from blue to green. And these bars are now red to say the whole session's fully reversed. Now, if we go back into the archive inquiry program and we click find, we won't see anything in there because everything's now been put back into the archive, into the live system, sorry. So that's a very quick overview. As I say, that was about eight or 9 minutes there. There's a lot more to purge it, but just to give you a flavor, everything's built within the toolset. It's very easy to use, very easy to configure as well. You don't have to learn a new interface before you learn how to purge an archive. Now, in terms of this slide, is titled for new Purgit customers. There's a similar slide for existing Purgit customers as well, but we won't go through that one today. The 6 main aspects that you see here of the purging and archiving project can be performed by Team Kane, by the customer, or by a combination of both. The most common approach that we have seen in the past is the second column, where Team Kane does the install and technical config, they do the training, and then the customer runs with a do-it-yourself project. But actually, we're seeing more and more people moving either to the third or the fourth column here, where people are going for a part or a full services project due to the time and resource constraints within their internal IT departments. Here are the results of a recent customer survey showing some really positive numbers, and including this one here, 20% of our customers who actually bought Purgit to replace a competitive generic archiving tool as well. So unfortunately, they bought something else before they bought Purgit, but they then came to the Purgit family and received all of the relative benefits. So so that's it from me at the moment. If there's any questions, I'll take them at this time now. But if I hand over to Doug just to go through these next steps slide. Doug, you still there?
Yep, sure am. We did have one question come in, Russ, about non-technical, but if we were recording the webinar, and I let that person know, but to let everybody else know as well, we are recording the webinar as we do for all of our webinars, and we will post the recording on our website in the next day or so, so that if you did get called away or you want to share this with anyone else in your organization, absolutely, you can log into teamkane.com to find that. And if, of course, you'd like to set up a more personalized demo for you and your team, or we can talk more about how it can benefit you at your individual organization, we're more than happy to do that as well. So as far as next steps, Russ mentioned we've got the survey coming up. We would really appreciate if you would take a couple of minutes just to fill that out, give us some feedback on our webinar today. We also would love to do an analysis of your JDE data. So it's a very simple process. We can send you instructions for whichever database platform you're on. It extracts just the number of tables and the size of the tables, so no company information, anything along those lines. And then we give that back to you, and it shows where your data is, which of the modules from Purgit would be able to handle it. Really handy in a lot of different instances, not just for purging and archiving. We've got the GoToWebinar channel. Russ, do you want to talk about that one? Or is that?
Yeah, that's fine. GoToWebinar channel, we've got that hanging off of the ClickIT GoToWebinar account. So any webinars that we record, we can upload to there, and there's a whole host of different webinars on there. There's one with about 15 different mini case studies in. There's another one which is 45 minutes of pure Purgit, and some various other webinars on there as well. So yeah, get in touch if you want to have a look at those. If you want to hear more of my dulcet tones.
Very nice. So just to continue with the next steps, we do have many more case studies that we can share with you. if that's something that you would be interested in. Let's see. We actually had a question come in that's somewhat related to this next one. But we can talk about a Purge and Archive project in conjunction with what you may be doing. And of course, we can get you a quote based on what type of or what parts of Purge it would make sense for you. But Russ, the question that came in is how are upgrades and enhancements implemented, Boomerang or JDE CNC tools? So,
Yeah, yeah, sure. We deliver all of the software as ASUs. So if you take the full version 4.29 as it is now, and we create version 4.30 as an update, then it's an ASU or ESU, and you apply it just via the normal standard JD Edwards routines there. If you did want it to come as a boomerang, we could do that, but we tend to send things as ASUs because then it's managed within the JD Edwards change control system a lot better. So you can plug, you load an ASU or an ESU, and when you apply it to the different path codes and environments, it generates any necessary tables, loads data, and all that kind of stuff according to the OCMs that are set up. So we generally try and stick to that method. But if you do prefer Boomerang, then we can do that for you as well because we've got the full Boomerang product.
Okay, great. Thanks, Russ. So I think I had covered everything for suggested next steps. Yeah. So please, and if anyone else has any follow-up questions, go through that question tab and go to webinar control panel and put that in there. We can definitely keep the webinar open for a bit here to capture that.
I was just going
Russ, anything else to?
Yeah, I was just going to show an example of the data analysis that we can perform for you as well. So the type of information that we take out, this is from an SQL database. It's number of records, sizes of data, sizes of index, and so on. We add in the JD Edwards description for the table, and also an analysis of whether it's purged and archived by a particular purge it module, and also if it's one of the standard EDI documents that we've got pre-configured within JD Edwards within purge it as well. That information then spins out into a couple of pivot tables where you see each of the categories laid down there, the summary of that information, but also some sort of a business analyst type analysis down there of how that data is made up as well. So here we can see this particular customer had 41 million records in manual backup, so that should be a real quick win to get rid of that 40 gigabytes of data for them.
Thanks, Russ. Another question came in. Is there a cost for the table analysis? And no, that we do as free of charge, part of the sales cycle. More than happy to get that off to you. As I said, I can send off an instruction sheet for whatever type of database you might have. You do that quick extract, send that data back to us. Usually pretty quick, depending on how busy the technical folks are, but I would say within a couple of days. We'll turn that around, send that off to you. We can set up a time to walk through the analysis, or if you just want to take it and run, fine with that. There's absolutely no obligations to get that. So looking to get that scheduled, I'll go ahead and shoot you off an email with the instructions. You can do the extract, send it off to us, and we'll be off and running. So it's as easy as that. Let's see, another question on security, Russ. So security on the purge it objects is through base JDE security, correct?
Correct, yeah. Purge it is completely built within the JD Edwards toolset. So we use applications, UBEs, tables, business functions, anything and everything that you use within JD Edwards at the moment. That's how we build Purge it. So the interface, the system administration, the way you configure the location of tables with OCMs and database data sources, and the security, the task views, and etc. Everything like that is exactly, as you say, standard and stock JD Edwards.
Thanks, Russ. So we are at the top of the hour. So I know we'll try to be mindful of people's time. We know it's sometimes hard to carve out an hour, so we absolutely appreciate you taking the time to sit with us and listen to the what did you refer to it? The placid tones, Russ?
The dulcet tones.
Dulcet. That's what it was. Yes. But thank you to everyone. Russ, thank you as always to you. Fantastic job. Thanks for walking us through this. And please reach out with any questions. Russ or I would be happy to talk with you on your particular situation. So as I said, we can keep the webinar open for a few more minutes if there's any other questions. But that's it for today. So thanks so much.